There is not much actual NFL stuff going on day to day, but my God, the Best Ball Street's still talking, and there's lots going on. We're back in BBM. Pick the 11 slot. This one auto-filled, so sorry if you didn't get a chance to jump in with us already tonight, but we are going straight into the draft. Tyler, though, it'd be remiss if we didn't talk about what everyone's talking about in a shorter version than perhaps some people are giving it. How do you feel about the kind of draft overlays and the dynamic ranking systems that are upsetting a lot of people and causing a lot of people to get passionate one way or the other?
In short, I understand the folks. Like, this is a fun hobby for many. It's a recreational activity, and it's something that is enjoyable to go peer to peer, and measure your ball knowing versus each other. At the same time, though, these have always been hard contests. They get harder to win every year, with the knowledge base getting, like, everything's becoming table stakes every year with the edges you can push in. And this is also not the first iteration of tools available like this. I understand that people feel very strongly. I think this wave is stronger just because it's a larger company and platform this time around. But we've had the same similar conversations year over year. And at the end of the day, anytime you have this much money and these many actors involved, I think you're headed in a direction where tools in every edge to profit is going to come into play. And that said, adapt or die becomes part of it. And I understand the folks that are upset that we might be getting there much quicker than they were hoping. At the end of the day, I think it just comes down to Underdog and the platforms that host these tournaments. It's up to them how they want to, enforce their terms of services, their boundaries. And as users, I think if you have issues, go to the platform and give your voice there. And that's really all you can do, because at the end of the day, ultimately, it's up to the platform.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Like, I understand the points of view from both sides, but this is a space that's filled with people who play serious money at DFS, who played serious money at poker, and to not expect there to be tools similar to those games to travel over to this area of fantasy, it just seems a little bit naive, and I understand why people are upset about it. But yeah, I mean, there's millions of dollars on the line through fantasy football, and it's kind of on us to make the decision about how we want to play. And I like the tools that track exposures and give more insights to that. I think there's a lot of good stuff there. Personally, I don't enjoy the kind of dynamic rankings for suggested picks and stuff like that. I think for me, it's about feeling out how I feel comfortable about a player, how I feel comfortable about a team. And that's a process for me that starts at this point of the year, setting my rankings, and then develops throughout the off season. So I can't see myself ever paying up for any of those tools, but I certainly won't be upset if somebody binks BBM by using one of those tools to draft, because they're all there. And if you want to subscribe to them, you can. So I think that's probably going to do it for us on this. We're about to be on the clock at 111. Amon-Ra St. Brown falling just around a little bit, and then Nico Collins, Brian Thomas. I really struggle with this tier. I mean, Amon-Ra is obviously the top of it, but are you starting to take a bit more CMC in there?
I think you kind of have to. The reports are good. The staff comments are pretty good. And if nothing else, I think he's going to get more expensive. So I'd like to get my exposure to him when he's not. All that said, Amon-Ra at 11 feels like an auto smash, and I'll be happy with whatever we end up doing, which is probably going to have to be pivoting, because I expect both these players to go back to back. Are you good with Amon-Ra?
I'm good with Amon-Ra, yeah. I just think it's he's too reliable an option to pass up. I think, like, where I'm struggling with the Lions, it's not with Gibbs, it's not with Montgomery or even Laporta, it's Jamo, and we can come back to him in a minute. We're about to be back up on the clock, see what this team at the turn does. We took Brian Thomas with a first pick. If they don't take CMC, I'd be completely fine with that. I do have a little bit of hesitancy around CMC, but in the second round, like you say, he only seems to be getting more and more expensive.
Yeah, I'd rather take him now as a second round pick, where I think, I'm with you, where it was initially scary, but to get the TLDR for folks that might be tuning in for the first time, or the first time in a long time, it seems like the treatment that CMC got for his Achilles is the same treatment that George Kittle got and has seemingly taken really, really well. Obviously, Kittle got it at a much younger age than CMC has had it, but it seems like long-lasting effects, anecdotally from a player standpoint, those have been effective. We've had a couple of the fantasy docs that you and I trust a lot, and they've come out and said we have no concerns for the long-term effects of this Achilles tendonitis given his treatment and given the amount of rest he's going to have before we even get into the season. And he still saw a really strong pass game usage, signaling with Mason leaving the team and then not drafting a substantial running back in the draft. I have to acknowledge signals, even if I'm not super duper ready to like slam the go button. But if he's going to, and I do expect CMC likely rises and probably passes up some of these receivers, especially as the running back hungry, quote unquote, casual fan base. I don't know how much more casual we can call him after BM6. But he seems like a guy that may get to the point where he flips Genty by the end of drafting summer, especially with more good news. So I'm happy to just say at minimum, he seems like a CLV play, and at maximum, he's a super strong bet to make because we have similar. I mean, how different from HN, as far as like pass game involvement go Burr at the bull case.
Yeah, I think that's all very much fair. I just think that while you make completely valid points about CMC's Achilles, it's also just kind of fair to wonder, is he just going to start getting more banged up? Is this a player who we've seen go through periods of his career and get banged up? And yes, for different injuries. And yes, betting on injuries isn't something that tends to be a great method. But I just think that there's something with CMC where I can sell the upside of Devon Achane a little bit easier. I don't have Devon Achane ranked ahead of CMC, but it just feels a little bit, I don't know, I'm just not quite comfortable with CMC on the 1-2 turn at the minute. Maybe that's something that's going to change if his price does stay there, but it wasn't that long ago where we were getting him a few picks later, and that felt more palatable to me.
I think that's totally fair. I'm just trying to mix in. I don't have a reason to full fade him outside of narrative things. And we've played long enough that we know that those are not always, suitable. Chaos runs both ways. Derrick Henry crushing last year says hello. And so I just think from he cannot be as explosive as he once was, but if the team is committed to giving him a lot of work, which all signs and comments point to doing so, and it makes sense given his contract and the way the team is operating. But also, I think when I look at team implosion risk, which I do like to take into account over the full course of the season, because ideally in the playoff weeks, we like teams trying their hardest to score points with the players we draft early. And I can confidently say that even with the Niners having one of the seasons from hell under this regime that they had last year, they were still giving it their all and trying to compete for the playoffs. And where they even, you could have said, hey, season's lost, why play CMC coming back from this? And they still played him, and they tried to play him a lot before he hurt his foot. So I think I'm much more worried about the Dolphins, given the Ramsey trade rumors, the Tyreek weirdness, the lack of O-line that was really added early and often in the draft and free agency. And we've seen the Miami Dolphins kind of semi-implode year over year and struggle by the end of the year. So from that standpoint, I can say, hey, from a macro risk, it seems fine enough to at least mix in if I'm not completely structurally building, wide receiver in the second round, which I don't want to do because these running backs are powerful in any given week.
Yeah. And that's it's a complex argument. I think if you want to build the positive case for CMC, it's quite easy to say, okay, there's no Deebo Samuel there. Brandon Ayuk could be mid-season or so, or maybe he gets ready earlier on in the season. But if somebody's going to hoover up that near the line of scrimmage stuff, some of the work that Deebo did in that area, then perhaps it is CMC if he's fully healthy. It's going to take me a little more time to get used to it, but you've done more drafts than I have. I'm just starting to ramp up my volume at the minute. And that's when you kind of definitely become more comfortable with it. So I'm looking forward to coming back to this in a few weeks and seeing whether I found that an easier pick. I'm not going to say what we could do here because I know you have one very strong stance that we're probably going to have to talk about here.
I
And
have
then
become like Bruce Lee at this point. Be like water, my friend. So I'm going to be as flexible as possible because we know nothing and we're all going to lose. Ain't that right, Tom?
well, yeah, I mean, cut to 9 months later, and no, none of us made any money, but we had a good time along the way. That's what really counts, not any of this draft caddy bullshit and stuff.
Right.
So the user in front of us times out and leaves us your boy Devante Adams. Is he the easy click for you, Tyler, or are you mixing in anyone else when you get these kind of little bits with
I'm
Adams?
okay mixing in the worthy and rookies. I just still think Adams is a very strong click that might get more expensive as the year goes on. But if you have a guy you'd like to pull up here, I won't wag my finger.
No, I'm okay with Adams. I think that gives us kind of like a nice build of high volume players in McCaffrey and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then Adams is somebody that we've kind of talked about this a few times. Like I really think he is going to add to the Rams in the red zone in a way they just didn't get last year. Puka Nacua only has like 11 receiving touchdowns over 2 years, and might even be lower than that. Maybe it's even single digits. But Adams is just so good down there. Matthew Stafford's so good. I think that it will pay off. But yeah, I mean, if you want to add Ted McMillan here or Travis Hunter, I'd be fine with one of those guys for an upside swing now we've locked in a decent bit of volume and roles.
Do you have a take on who you'd prefer, Tet versus Travis? This is where I've had a hard time mixing in.
Yeah, I'm just slightly tat, and it's just simply because I don't respect anyone in Carolina. Whereas, Brian Thomas was so good last year that it kind of makes it just a little bit easier to just say, right, what volume's there? What can we see? And I think that the way Tet can win the ball, I think, also lends itself to being just a decent volume bet. But it's really difficult because I think Travis Hunter's upside is possibly a bit higher than Tet. I know Rich would probably come around on the same. I know he's got Tet ahead of him in dynasty rankings, but when it comes down to just on an upside cases, like Travis Hunter is just unreal. But yeah, in a best ball sense, I do keep kind of splitting my exposures between them and telling myself, what does this team need a little more often than saying, which player do I think is the best player at the cost?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's really just going to come down to, for our purposes, which is the best player through the playoffs and even the finals. And that's where I go. I see both of them having really strong weeks. I personally as well lean Tet simply because there's a much clearer path to him right now being the best player, and then by far the best player that's getting like it's the BTJ thesis, right? Like he's coming in easily the most talented, the youngest, and the biggest priority to feed. Leggett looked extremely raw and poor, though he was banged up. I can make all those concessions, but I think the team told us what they think about him because they took Tet at 8, so they invested more capital than they did in Leggett, and he's just a stronger prospect. He's got the big body. I've spoken a couple times on this channel and other channels that I think that Tet's upside is what we saw with BTJ, where he's being used all over the formation, but especially as like, hey, power slot and a 6'5" power slot feels like someone that can score a shitload of touchdowns. And we've seen that be the answer you want in the playoffs. And for Hunter, I do think that, yeah, I want to take bets on the guy who went second overall. It seems like offense is going to be his primary focus, and we've seen what Cohen can do with multiple receivers. But I do think BTJ is the main focal point, given his his archetype, his prospect profile, and size. And that I think I think like BTJ and Hunter can cap each other just a little bit in most cases, but 99th percentile, I do think. I see the vision with how McDaniel's fed
Yeah.
Reek and Waddle as like 65% of the offense. I fully expect that for the Jaguars if they're cooking.
Yeah, it's that. It's the Bengals sort of mindset. It's like it's not as unfathomable as we thought it might be a few years ago. I mean, you can even say it's the Eagles with, Dallas Goedert playing like the tight end role in Jaguars, and saying that's Brendan Strange or whoever fulfills that. So I've got faith that they can figure it out to a point where it's worthwhile. Our guy Chris in the chat says, I know some undervalued Saints in the round 5 to 6 in that range. Like, have you been seeing those guys kind of falling a lot on the back of the Derek Carr news? Like, it felt like it felt like we knew Derek Carr probably wasn't going to play this year, or it probably wasn't going to be a lot of starts for the Saints. But now that we know for sure that the situation is really murky there, are you seeing any kind of dips in ADP, Tyler?
I mean, I'm continuing to get a lot of Kamara here, in the mid to late 60s after the fun young guys go. But I have seen him continue to get pulled up into the mid to early 50s based on projections. I think Kamara once again projects very, very well as like if Tyler Shuck wins it, which he likely will because the other options are just so bad and the draft capital so clear. He was really kind of like a dink dunk type of Derek Carr clone in that way. And his low ADOT stuff seemed to work really well. We know Kellen Moore emphasizes the like motion shift, short ADOT stuff anyway. And it seems like, the Shaheed types are going to, potentially suffer the most because of the accuracy and the lack of downfield passing. So I've seen Olave dipping in boredom and lack of sexiness. And that's kind of how I'm prioritizing it, as I think Olave could be a fine pick. I have a hard time taking him over some of these other stronger options with potentially much stronger offenses. But there is a range where it's just like, well, you think his target shareability can still, provide him a nice floor and ceiling when you get into sketchier options. But Kamara just stands out as another strong pick who could have just a really strong year with potentially better offensive scheme under Kellen Moore.
Yeah, it's just kind of like that age thing for Kamara. Obviously, last year didn't finish the season, still never had a 1,000-yard rushing season, and it's just a bit crazy, bit like that Zay Flowers fall. But we're back up on the clock. Addison, Kenneth Walker, Trevion Henderson, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave. I'd be kind of okay with Olave if you wanted to go there. If you wanted to see if he fell, I'd be kind of leaning slightly at Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, I think Kenneth Walker presents a really strong pick. Let's see what we can push around the turn. I'm really buying the Kool-Aid on how efficient this running attack can be. Darnold has a deep passing profile, and Kubiak peppered the shit out of Kamara with targets, and his history of RB targets is pretty strong. I'm fine taking Olave here as our wide receiver 4.
Yeah, let's go with that. I think Olave, obviously, there's been so many points where it's like Olave could be great. Olave might be completely washed if Olave gets a concussion, blah, 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 blah. But I think as a wide receiver 4, that's pretty damn good value. And Kenneth Walker in round 5 feels like a really good value. I think, what the team have communicated, it seems so clear cut that they want to get back to running the ball. And as much as Zach Charbonnet looked fantastic last year, I just don't think that Kenneth Walker's going to lose the RB1 duties anytime too soon.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think one thing to point to is that when Derek Carr was healthy, presumed healthy, and we saw Olave have an ADP here in this range of the late 40s, early 50s. I think the only thing really keeping him down is the market continues to kind of double count the concussion FUD risk, which seemingly he's been fine. Like we've only gotten really good reports about his recovery from that. And then now it's is Derek Carr going to play? And now it's Tyler Shuck, and this may be too harsh of a ranking, and I would not be surprised if his rank, because like I if you told me like gun to my head, Waddle or Olave, I see the path for Olave very clearly. It's just like the offense is terrible, the defense is terrible, but Olave and Kamara are getting 40 to 50% of the targets every week, and it doesn't matter. I see that vision very clearly.
Well, do you think that we should be more concerned with this Tyreek Hill wrist injury? He had a surgery last week, and everybody was saying, okay, this was scheduled, this was always the plan, but we know how much kind of bullshit that can be sometimes. Like, what if Tyreek Hill is just completely washed and his wrist isn't healthy? Is Jalen Waddle going to be the guy that, could we see the potential of him really being good? And particularly if they lose Jalen Ramsey and don't have any assets kind of coming in this year to make a big difference on defense, is this the year where Jalen Waddle finally puts it together? I know last year I drafted probably 20% Jalen Waddle and really thought it could be, and it just was probably one of the worst picks in fantasy.
Yeah, I struggle to see. I think at this point the Waddle contingency was like Hill gets traded, and right now, what team is trading for Hill coming off of quote unquote said scary wrist injury. It does seem that it was just to remove some screws and things. So from that standpoint, if the doctors are saying, hey, it seemed pretty standard stuff, I have a hard time disagreeing with that. I'm not a doctor. I think I'm worried that Hill is definitely on the downward trajectory, but Waddle's fall off was much more precipitous in the same environment, and I think that's more concerning. That I really do think Waddle's been a very strong PPR scam since he came out, and that was very easy when the offense was very strong and very efficient. But now that there's like a very strong wide receiver esque target earner, a CMC type in Achan, and a tight end that's not a full blocker, there's no longer Smythe. It's one of the most efficient tight ends in the last decade, just in like explosive yak ability. I think like even if Hill is washed, unless he's gone, he's still going to be someone that they prioritize just because you have to manage that type of like diva personality and his contract. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to move Tyreek this year with where they're at now. If he was going to get moved, it was likely the draft. We kind of saw that with Andrews and Goddard, both kind of, Goddard getting the reworked deal. So I don't want to get too gigabrain with it personally. And I think even in those two environments, I think Olave could still pass Waddle just because of the path to targets is clearer for Olave than it is Waddle right now, given how the offense is.
Yeah, so back on the clock, Matthew Golden, Brandon Ayuk, wide receivers there, and then Darnell Mooney, somebody that we've got a bit of content coming out on him from Rich over the next couple of days, and then it's the running backs. Maybe Brian Robinson is somebody like we should be clicking here, Tyler. Like I know we were both in on him last year and it didn't pay off. Like they added nothing with Commanders. Like can I
tell you on Golden here first after ADP?
Okay, well let's take that and see if Brian Robinson comes back to me because like I just feel like it's much like the argument with Jaylen Warren, which we had like I don't want to give up on these players who a year ago we were convinced had upside when things haven't particularly changed for the worse for them. Yes, we haven't seen any more upside from them, but yeah, Brian Robinson is somebody that I'm not going to go as crazy as last year where he was my most rostered player, but I'm willing to go, a nice sort of comfortable 10%.
No interest in a San Francisco double stack with Ayuk as wide receiver 6.
You make a compelling case for this roster. Fine, let's go CMC. But I'm not giving up on Brian Robinson in the future.
I am happy to give you that. I think this is a good discussion point because I went through and checked out Brian Robinson. I do think from a price standpoint, he's likely to find his way to stick around in this range. I do think just because we did Walker and CMC, I think it seems like Ayuk is going to get a little bit more expensive with this health news potentially.
That's fair.
It sounds like he is straight up a decent shot to be able to avoid the pup, which I think 2 months ago I was pretty concerned that was not going to be the case. And someone asked about Olave being the cheapest wide receiver 1 on the board. Well, it's potentially whoever the San Francisco 49ers wide receiver 1 is. With Jennings going in the mid 60s, Rizzy Pearsall going anywhere from 75 to 80, and then Ayuk going from anywhere from 75 to 90. That is an ambiguity that I want to target. It seems like Ayuk is healthy enough, explosive enough, the contract is motivating enough, and I'm buying into the San Francisco offense, especially as like a deep passing philosophy, especially with this Purdy situation, needing to extend him, needing to win because of him. The CMC bet we sold ourselves on as a target thing. I think that applies to all the pass catchers. We know every single one of the San Francisco pass catchers has contingent upside. And as far as just roster flexibility, we know he's got 2 touchdown upside because of his role, his body size, and if he sees less targets, than your Olaves, your Godwin types, but the types of touches he's seeing is deep targets. That's how we score touchdowns. That's how we score points in explosive play. And I don't mind Brian Robinson. I am a little concerned that he's
not a game breaker
in a timeshare.
Yeah, and it worked out better for him at times because of Eckler's injuries, because of the concussion, and obviously Eckler's older, and we've seen this from him for a couple of years now, that he seems to be slowing down a bit. But betting on that being Brian Robinson's path to paying off cost seems potentially foolsworthy. I think it's more just like I'm quite comfortable banking on the volume of Brian Robinson and saying, okay, I know I can lock him in and he's going to give me 60 to 80 yards a week consistently and probably score somewhere in the region of 6 to 10 touchdowns across the season, which doesn't sound phenomenal. But I think when you compare him with guys around that range, DeAndre Swift, who has never managed to keep coaching staff happy for a whole season, Isaiah Pacheco, who's coming off injury, and I know he's been posting videos, but faces increased backfield competition. Cam Scatterbo, who now has to get past Devin Singletary, who coach staff like, and as well as Tyron Tracy. I just think that there's a case for going, Brian Robinson's probably the least sexy pick in that range, but Brian Robinson could equally be the one that allows you to build in certain different ways. But that said, I'm quite happy with what we did with Brandon Ayuk and CMC, and just going, okay, well, everybody's trying to decipher which of the guys out of Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall ends up being the wide receiver one, and maybe just is Brandon Ayuk and CMC who just hoover up all the high value stuff.
Yeah, I think the point for Brian Robinson is that he is a large body that is given multiple touches in the red zone. That's a good recipe for having spike weeks. He's attached to a super exciting offense that we like a lot, and they didn't add a whole lot to it. I think the only competition that Ertz really maybe hurts the most from adding another low ADOT Debo to the mix. That said, it was just really worrisome to see B-Rob never really eclipse 55 to 60% touch and snap share. It didn't matter if that was Eckler or McNichols. And it also wasn't great that he was subbed out of the red zone for guys like McNichols. And then you toss in Jaden McDaniels. Jaden Daniels has rushing upside in the green and red area. And I think just his current price presents potentially a little bit more downside than I'd like, considering all of that. But his contingent upside in a David Montgomery-esque way is very exciting. I was just really hopeful that, given how last year broke, and he dealt with injuries himself, but the chances he had to capture all the work, hey, will it consolidate? And the offense philosophically said, no, it will not consolidate. We will split this up no matter who's in the backfield. And that's concerning from a total upside standpoint. But we've got Mason and Warren on the board. I wonder. It seems like we can push Purdy around.
Yeah, let's push Purdy. In terms
unless we want to just get both of our quarterbacks here in Goff and Purdy.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. That feels like a 2 QB build there. Purdy first and then Goff.
Let's get our quarterback set up, because I think CMC Walker, that's a strong running back for him that allows us to wait and access our quarterbacks. What I've noticed is pushing quarterbacks has been fraught with risk. You never know who's actually going to make it back to you.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird landscape of quarterback one at the minute. I've been drafting predominantly on drafters at the minute, and just kind of I've got maybe 40 slows going, and it seems like I'm just kind of approaching that tier where you've really got to make up your mind between whether you want to push it or not. And I haven't quite sussed out this year how comfortable I am with 2 QB when you wait till this range, the classic Rotoviz 2 QB in a window sort of stuff. And I think Brock Purdy and Jared Goff I'd be fine with. Obviously, we've got the schedule release coming this week. We're going to hear plenty about that. Would you say with Brock Purdy and Jared Goff in back-to-back picks there that you'd be fine leaving that, or are you going to lean towards maybe a late-round flyer on someone?
I think my philosophy really hasn't changed on this, in that I think any 2 QBs are viable if they, have a good enough season, you build well enough where quarterback's the most important scoring position on half-point PPR. So any 2 are viable. If Brock has a breakout season where he's a top 10 quarterback, if Goff sustains, super high touchdown rates, they were higher last year than they were the year before that, but he still had a solid floor and ceiling, especially for spike weeks. An internal hire at OC, when with Ben Johnson leaving, it's a little worrisome, but it's every year we worry about it, and every year under Dan Campbell, this offense, this organization keeps it cool and keeps on trucking. So I'd say from a stability standpoint, what these guys have both shown in floor and ceiling, I can absolutely say this is enough for me, and let's build stronger elsewhere. But if a third stacked quarterback is available, I'll almost always say yes, because I know that that's so powerful from an advance rate play, a playoff advance rate play, and then a final stack, expected hit rate. Because we don't know what's going to be represented in the finals. And if I make it to the finals, having 3 different stacks presents, nice outlets to get there. We've seen multiple BBM winners have, 3 stacked quarterbacks. So at the end of the day, I'm never going to say no. I want to remain as flexible as possible to play each room the way I want to play it. And I wouldn't say no to a third quarterback that's stacked just because I decided these quarterbacks are going to be enough. Because at the end of the day, 17 weeks is a long time, and we don't know how things are going to play out. And they could both be the perfect picks, but if one of those guys misses a week and they have a down week and you get wiped out in the playoffs, and that's part of the power of the 3 quarterbacks is playoff weeks. You'd like as many options as you can to sustain, and without taking an elite quarterback, your floor ceiling becomes a little bit worse than all those other teams that have those guys, and that's the worry.
Yeah, and I've had plenty of conversations with people about this over the years. Like, my philosophy on 20-round best ball is that I'd much rather have 3 quarterbacks so often, but it's reliant on getting that stack. I don't like taking a third quarterback just for the sake of it. I think it is very much more. It's looking for that extra 1 week bump. And to everyone commenting on my lack of hair, yep, this would be about the point in the stream where I realize I'm not wearing a hat on camera for probably the first time in at least 2 years. Got to get some more hats. If anyone watching has got some merch they can send me, send some hats my way. I can't even. No idea where half my hats are after moving house.
Behold the glory in all its infinite beauty.
Right. So, we're a couple of picks away. Obviously, 2 quarterbacks already, 2 running backs. We've got a nice wide receiver room, no tight ends yet to speak of. So, where do you see us going with this one, Tyler?
Well, if we punt running back again, we might be a little thin, but we have a potential to add a double stack here at the turn. That's always going to get me a little curious. But if we want to add a running back, I totally understand. So, and certainly we could just Tucker Kraft's been falling inexplicably. So if we also wanted to go 1 quarterback, 1 running back, I have no strong leans. All these feel good to me. I will acknowledge that punting running back 4 straight rounds, a little dicey, but I feel fine if the CMC is the play we think he is. And Walker's the play we think he is.
I know you said Tucker Kraft's been falling, but I think I'd be more comfortable. Tucker Kraft goes. I'd have to push Jordan Love around the corner. I feel like
I agree.
It's one of those running backs. And
which one of these guys gets your giblets going?
I mean, I've got a soft spot for Rashad White, but I'd be fine taking Ramondre as well and just saying that the rookie just struggles in a way that we know is fair for rookies to struggle.
Or / we really don't know what Vrabel and McDaniels are going to do in this offense.
Yeah.
And as a contingent bet, it's not that bad of a thing.
Yeah, I know, like, people got pissy about Ramondre's fumbles last year, and the coaching staff there were really up and down about it. But, like, that coaching staff had no idea what they were doing. I think it's completely fair to say that we could see a different side to Ramondre this year and see a bit more fire from him. So yeah, again, he's a player that I was more confident on last year, but I'm fine taking a sprinkling of this year. Kincaid, Ferguson, I don't mind Ferguson, but probably, I don't know if I'd take him ahead of any of those guys. Anyone you want to pound the table for?
No, I say let's keep disrespecting tight ends. So you shouted White. Do you like White more than Spears or Garindo? Garindo stacks?
Yeah, I do.
We have CMC.
I know there was some talk about, like, the idea that Rashad White might have been available for a trade around the draft, but it always seemed like a weird one that a team would be willing to give up draft capital for Rashad White when we've got all these incoming rookies. But what Rashad White does well, he does really well, and I appreciate that's probably more valuable on full PPR sites. But Rashad White isn't going to completely disappear from this Bucks offense, I don't think. So I'm good with that. We've got a question in the chat from Mr. Magic. Rank these guys in redraft: Puka, CD, Malik, Neighbors, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. For me, that is CD, Puka, Malik Neighbors, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Tyler, do you kind of disagree on that?
I just want to hit send and show you that we had the exact same rank.
Boom.
Yeah, I think I love Brown, and I think I will say some people they value safety over upside in redraft. I don't necessarily agree with that, but if that's you, then yeah, you can slot Brown ahead of Neighbors. But I do think Neighbors' safety is that his safety net at quarterback got better. Like Russ is almost certainly better than Dimes, down in and down out. His lack of middle of the field targeting is not the best, but none of his quarterbacks really did that well last year to begin with. And Winston and Dart present black box upside that would put Neighbors probably ahead of everybody but CD and even potentially CD. I know the best ball sickos would take Neighbors ahead of everyone but Chase if you said you get 17 games of Winston. I would say if you're worried about Puka, people were worried about Keenan Allen, who could never stay healthy, and then he stayed healthy and crushed. So I'd say that the man landed on his bursa sack, which I would wager 90% of Americans had no idea what a bursa sack was before that happened, and came back and shredded it in total usage and volume. Not to mention the fact that the Rams O-line came into week 1 missing 4 starters. So despite a season from hell, Puka showed us all how powerful he is, how good he is, and we've talked about how I think Adams at X doesn't kill Puka. It allows the passing offense to be as versatile and explosive as it can be, and Stafford's been able to support multiple guys. So at the end of the day, Puka's the St. Brown play, except he's just a much more explosive player. And he and Adams are clearly the best 2 options, whereas Brown, there's 5 really good options in Detroit, and we've seen them kind of play matches against everyone. So in redraft, I don't think you can go wrong going after the super talented guys with clear volume roles, because at the end of the day, that's the simplest way we can play fantasy football really well.
Yeah, just like the amount of scheme touches to Puka Nacua, the amount of plays which are just firmly designed for him, I think still matters. Sean McVay is excellent at what he does, and Rich bangs on about it a lot. Design targets are really something which pay off massively in fantasy, and I'm very much fine leaning into that just slightly to give Puka that kind of layup, really. But I understand it. I understand it's not for everyone. I'm going to do a solo drafters stream on Thursday this week, 4 p.m. Eastern, where I'm going to be talking through kind of my rankings as I draft. I'll have those up in the Discord by Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on how the day job goes. But yeah, I think it's the right time of year to start leaning into those. Bit of disagreement on Pickens in the chat. I think, look, Pickens probably isn't going to be the contested catch guy that he was in his rookie season, where his numbers were just insane. But I think what he is going to do is draw enough targets that it's going to be meaningful compared to last year. If the Cowboys hadn't added anyone, I would have had CD as my wide receiver 2 with no question. As it is, I think it kind of gets a little more blurred between him and Justin Jefferson. You can create a downside argument for both of them, whilst also creating really strong upside cases for them. Back on the clock, Romeo Dubs is in the queue. I'd be kind of fine with that. I don't feel like there's anybody I massively love in this range. Braylon Allen feels like kind of okay 0 RB target, but not necessarily somebody I'd want as our 5th running back at this point. Any tight ends you want to make a case for with 7 seconds to go, or just keep rocking?
No, let's do Dobbs. He stacks with our golden bet. I think He's the only wide receiver that's run 80 or more percent of the routes in healthy games. If anything, Golden just allows the offense to keep doing what it's doing and Dobbs to not have to carry the load. And now the question is, do we want RB5 with Eckler? We pass up B-Rob to get access to that backfield, or we would like to take our third quarterback stacked with our Ted McMillan pick?
Yeah, let's take. I'd prefer to take Bryce Young. I think like the way we've distributed our running back picks with two in the first six and then two where we did, and then we can kind of swing for the fences a little bit on two more or so running back picks. Whilst I guess we're gonna have to really start paying attention to tight end at some point, but it is only round 14. We've got plenty of time.
Yep, agreed. I think we have a lot of flexibility, and yeah, the EV of this team is, hey, and we talked about like stacking, but like the highest expected value you get is a quarterback stacked with his wide receiver one. By taking Ted McMillan, or we are saying that is the wide receiver one, and so it just becomes you don't need a solver to tell you, hey, you took a wide receiver very high, take his quarterback at ADP. So bang, we've solved basketball, guys. Pack it up. This is the winning BBO.
Boom. Make sure you hit subscribe.
Yeah, you too can be a part of the $2 million stream when we watch back, and shout out everybody in chat. And yeah, I think the Dubs play is fine. If anybody's getting squeezed, Savion Williams added as kind of like a jet sweep weirdo gadget guy. That's typically what they do with the slot. That's kind of what they did with Reed in his rookie year. And yeah, Dobbs falling doesn't really make any sense. I mean, folks were taking him in the 9th round last year. I wasn't. I didn't think that was a good bet. But he's been right up there with the second or third leading team in targets. This is an offense we want pieces of. We know they score a lot of points. And if this team skews less run heavy season long or in a week, which to McFleur's credit, he game plans for matchups specifically. Like that's why Jaden Reed went from gotta have him rookie season and like playoff formats to where he disappeared one week because they said, hey, we've identified an issue with the Dallas front. And by going 12 personnel, we can abuse them, in the run game in the past. All that to say, talented head coach, an offensive scheme, a la McVay, a player who has middling talent, but in the 14th, 15th round, you're saying he's running a lot of the routes. It's a part of a good offense. And his whole thing is he catches touchdowns sometimes. And his competition is, potentially better than Christian Watson, but his role is safe. And you can't say that about a lot of guys that go in this range that are attached to good offenses.
You look at what the Green Bay offense was last year, and he was the only guy with a target share of 18% or more, and things were distributed for reasons you say. Now, maybe Matthew Golden changes things with that, but I think that more importantly, it just shows that they trust him as well, whereas like Jaden Reed seemed to really go disappear at points, and I know that you can say, well, okay, there was a game plan and he didn't necessarily suit it, but it's like Romeo Doubs was kind of a bit more consistent. And when you're talking in the 13th round, or I mean, like in the 18th round where Schneid got him last night, like I just think that that's an okay bet to make. Look, we're talking about guys like Tillman, Joshua Palmer, Hollywood Brown. Like there are so many question marks in this range, and to say, okay, we're going to get a guy who's going to play a very high percentage of snaps. The quarterback trusts him enough to target him consistently, then yeah, I'm fine with it, particularly with the way we build and when we're talking about our wide receiver 7.
Yeah, and I mean, like, look at the names that come off after him. Like, I understand why he's falling. I think ranks across the board in the industry have kind of nuked him and a couple other guys. And people that take him at ADP are the ones keeping his ADP high. That said, I don't think everybody like Dubs and Wicks falling off a cliff just because of first round Golden does not make much sense because there's a lot of holes in Golden's profile. I like him a lot for reasons to like for a rookie, but I also am very much concerned he could be like this year's Keon Coleman, where it's just like the holes were very much a problem, and what he added to the offense was better for real life football than fantasy football. And like everybody in the offense dropping, like it doesn't make any sense. I think the market's overreacting with double counting, and I expect that to adjust at least for the guys that are you run projections, Dub's gonna come back up because that's just how he runs his routes. RB5 or tight end 1?
I think we've probably got to go tight end 1. I think the quality when things come back is going to be pretty ugly. And yeah, I'd lean Gesicki ahead of the other two guys.
Yep, I'm good with attacking a tight end on an offense we expect to score a lot of touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, everybody's been shouting out as Romeo is a trade candidate. Where's he going, guys? Who is taking him, and why would the team walk away from him? Who's taking his job?
Who's given up anything to get him?
Yeah. So we're back on the clock. 3-4-7-1.
You feeling strong about Johnson?
I'm not. You give me your shout, and I'm good with whoever RB5 is.
I mean, it's Marshawn Lloyd for me. I'd be fine with just that team correlation. Like we've talked. I know we're Lloyd slappies around here, but yeah, I think
what could go wrong. Let's run back the same bet and hope for the best.
Yeah, and then we'll just double tap tight end to get out of here in the last 2 rounds and just have to deal with whatever ugly situation we're thrown. But I absolutely agree with this on like the value. I'm not sure that I see a team doing that when they can convince themselves that there's a promising rookie that they can get off, a train, off a practice squad or something like that. I think that teams probably, unless there's injuries, I just don't see Dubs being the kind of guy that teams give up draft capital for. But
my question is, so my question is always twofold. Why is the team trading him, and what is another team getting for him? Again, Romeo has had the most stable role back-to-back years. He's on a rookie contract. This team is saying we want to build young and figure it out. They lose Watson. I think that's the only reason they take Matthew Golden in the first round. If Watson doesn't tear his ACL, I strongly consider the team that's faded wide receiver draft capital continues to do so. I don't understand why they would trade away their boundary receiver that they have for dirt cheap, because Dobbs is a 4th-round pick. So getting rid of him takes away their versatility as an offense. That doesn't make any sense to me why a team competing in a Super Bowl window who's made a good playoff run back-to-back years with a rookie quarterback contract window, Love, who just got his extension. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me why Green Bay would trade him away. Who are they opening up routes for? 4th-round Savion Williams, Dontavian Wicks? Like, they like to rotate receivers. Why would they get rid of a receiver? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, the Saints have no reason to trade away picks for players this season. That doesn't mean that Mickey Loomis isn't going to do it. Like, Mickey Loomis just marches to his own beat, doesn't he? Like, he's not remotely concerned about what makes the most sense these days. He's just going to do what it takes to keep his job, keep the Saints looking.
They have they have the Romeo at home. His name is Brandon Cooks. They brought him back. They are set.
Proud themselves. So last couple of rounds, Tyler, how are you feeling about the team so far?
I mean, I'm loving it. I think the way we built made a lot of sense. We trusted the pocket. I think most importantly, the best thing you can do is stay flexible, maintain flexibility, and play the pockets. And I think with running back, quarterback, receiver, and at tight end, I mean, some of the last few picks are so gross, and you're throwing so many early darts that could all be dead. The darts that are usually the least dead at this point in the draft season are typically tight ends. It's a pretty secure role, low scoring, low projection, and they stay buried here. And every once in a while, you find a gem. So I'm gonna go back to. I mean, and this is I build a lot of my teams punt tight end because the lowest value position can get the lowest value draft allocation, and that allows me to build really strong teams if any of these tight ends pan out. So I'm always a fan.
So Chikakonkwo would be top of ADP, then Terrace Ferguson, who is going to have to fight with Higbee for snaps potentially, but has some upside there. I think then you're looking at guys like Arroyo, Higbee, Disley. Cole Kmet is somebody that I feel like still has some value. I'd be okay with that for a little bit of like a dart throw, but that's more next pick. Who's the one guy you view as must-have out of these Titans?
I think it's either Chig or Arroyo, just given the correlation and the way they talked about him. These three are a different tier than these two to me personally.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go with Chig for the first one.
Yeah.
Like, look, I mean, Chig might not develop into the kind of guy that he looked like at the back end of his rookie season, where we thought, this is the next Travis Kelce, but he is still the kind of player who's going to be out there and going to give you those weeks every season, which do flash. If you want a Royal here, I'm fine with that.
I think it's Arroyo or Higbee given team correlations.
My lean would be the dustier Tyler Higbee, but I don't mind. I'm not feeling strong.
I am say less. The Les Snead came out and said Terrence Ferguson is ideally taking over when Higbee decides to hang him up. So I won't be surprised if Ferguson is their next attempt to have their Higbee replacement, which they've tried for the last few years and have yet to do. We've already made a bet on this offense, and he scores touchdowns. So the LA thing has been weird. I liked Conklin. He was brought in for like a lot of nothing, but the staff talked pretty highly about Disley, and Disley did pretty good. And then they drafted Gadsden.
Rhonda Gadsden, yeah.
So personally, I think the median expectation is I expect a rotation of tight ends in LA, and any of these guys can matter any given week.
I think that's it. I think that possibly by the back end of the season, one guy will have become that focal point. One guy will have earned the trust of Justin Herbert. One guy will have earned the trust of Greg Roman to make him the focal point of the tight end plays that we know Greg Roman has leaned into over the years. But I don't think that there's a clear favorite right now. I don't think that Tyler Conklin is necessarily massively better than the other two, but I'm okay taking shots on it. I think I'd probably be more tempted on sites like FFPC with the tight end premium to take a dart from them, because they'll be dragged up to the point that they'll be drafted slightly more commonly. Whereas in this, it's probably, if I've got Justin Herbert, I'd be willing to take a dart from one of them more often than not.
Yeah, I think I'm staying away from the LA Charger tight ends unless I'm stacking with Herbert. I see reasons to take Disley. I see reasons to take Conklin, but it seems like they kind of just rotate guys, whoever's healthy and working, and every tight end fills a role. And until we know whose role is what, it's going to be hard to say who's most valuable. And all these guys are kind of like single contract year guys anyway. So, I think Arroyo stands out as a stronger play. That said, I feel a lot stronger if the team moved on from Fant. They can post June 1 him and save like $10 million. And if Arroyo is doing well,
significant amount of money.
If Arroyo, so I expect a lot of these guys to start moving up once, because that's the thing, tight end can come along slowly. And so the comments about Arroyo were really, really strong. The draft capital was surprisingly strong. His profile is interesting, but if he's having a slow camp, a team's not going to cut a viable tight end a la Higbee. Like, teams like the guys that can block and catch and allow them to do what they want to do and not be a hindrance. This team talked about how he can allow them to do everything they want to do, which Fant hasn't allowed them to do. AJ Barner's still in town. So I think that's part of the concern is just I'm ready to click him, but he makes more sense in stacks. He makes more sense as pure dart throws, but it makes a lot more sense, like a lot of these later rookies, once we get any indication who's coming along well and who's not. And we're still early enough that it's probably prudent to take the guys with potentially locked in roles who are getting undervalued right now because of the uncertainty.
Yeah, Tyler, I'm going to let you name this team, and then let's spin back to the draft board, because I think the pivot point for this draft was where we kind of needed the third quarterback when we took him. Obviously it was kind of a bit of a luxury to get Bryce where we did. I don't think it was a bad pick, but if we kind of go back to that range in the draft, and obviously we're picking out the 11th pick, we've got Bryce Young there, so it kind of went from there to like immediately after you've got Matthew Stafford, who we could have stacked. We've got Geno Smith, Tua, and then we've got Sam Darnold. So by the time it came back to us, the next picks were really the Russ Wilson, Tyler Shough, and Jackson Dart, who none of them feel particularly great. None of them really would have been options that made us feel fantastic about it. But do you think there was any, argument for trying to go tight end with Zach Ertz, Pat Freiermuth, Hunter Henry instead of going quarterback where we did there?
I think it's defensible. I just noticed that in these rooms, right about here is where tight ends can just inexplicably drop 20 picks. So anytime you could potentially double dip, I think it's viable. That said, without this drafter here who went 4 straight quarterbacks to make up for punting it, if he doesn't take Mason Taylor and K. Dotton back to back, those are 2 tight ends. I feel very strongly saying, hey, I'm good with just 2. And even then, I don't think Chig and Higbee over the course of a season, let alone in just a single week in the finals, projects very differently than Hunter Henry, Pat Freiermuth, and co. If anything, I could see the argument saying, taking our last running back. If anything, I think Dubs here was how different do you view Romeo versus Slayton? I think the bets are pretty similar. We had team correlation, so I think there was a stronger case to say, hey, we started out much stronger at wide receiver in this draft than we did at running back, and I would probably feel a lot better about this team. Marshawn is an arbitrage play on what Eckler is, pass catching back in a good role. But if you told me we went Eckler instead of Dubs and our quarterback, and then we just played the last receiver and the last tight end, I don't think it would have been too much different because we could have taken an Isaac Tesla with Jared Goff as well, just as an upside shot. So I think that's more defensible to me. The power of quarterback stacked up with an early round pick to me is just so much stronger than trying to fit in a tight end 3 type. And then I like Henry a lot better. Henry was fine, but how many weeks was he outproduced by Austin Hooper because of deep passing? So, and he's no spring chicken himself. I think he turns 34, 35 this year. So and then we have severe questions about Pat Freiermuth's offense. So to me, I think it's completely defensible how we built to just punt it off and say, we'll take who we take and we'll just take upside shots at offenses because these guys are probably going to project pretty decently to better than a lot of these mid-round guys when the thing hits the fan. Obviously, getting Brenton Strange would have been really nice, and I think that's the big miss out because that was a tier break.
Yeah, Brenton Strange over Romeo Dubs doesn't really feel like we'd be missing out on anything, and obviously, then it probably would have allowed a little bit more flexibility later on to stick at 2 tight ends. In terms of the first half of the board, obviously, we've kind of talked plenty about this back half, but, we went, I feel like there's not much controversial here. Amon Ra, Christian McCaffrey, Devontae Adams, Kenneth Walker, Chris Olave, and then was it Brandon Ayuk after that, or Matthew Golden, Brandon Ayuk before the 2 quarterbacks. Anything you would have done differently in hindsight or feel quite happy with that? For me, I feel completely at ease for that first half of the draft. Just felt very easy going.
Yeah, there's probably going to be 2 viable receivers from this range when it's all said and done, and I won't be surprised if it's not that many. Same thing with running back. I think I'm trying to build right now, and how can I avoid maybe the least misses? And that's something I'll have to rewire for because at the end of the day, hits matter so much more than misses. We've seen a few BBM rosters where, hey, their hits were so strong that it didn't matter that they took Alexander Madison in the 6th round for I believe BBM 4. So that said, getting a rookie in Golden who kind of comps to Ladd McConkey in a way, had a strong finish to the end of the season in his collegiate career, gets really strong draft capital, and the team talks about his versatility. He's a guy I was fading a little bit early, but getting a 10-put discount on him, I'm absolutely going to load up on that. And I think we took the better shot upside in Brandon Ayuk over B-Rob, saying, hey, we're going to take B-Rob shots for cheaper. And I really do think that that's the way I kind of view it. Ideally, a Charbonnet would have been interesting, but not getting locked out at quarterback, especially when they're stacked up, is just so powerful. And one of the things I've been experimenting with and relearning the lesson is that when we could take stacks at quarterback and that just allows you much more roster flexibility with 1 running back through 7,
Yeah.
and getting your quarterback stacked up, because take the value where it falls. We only really get value in Golden and Ayuk, but that was more than enough to allow us to make up for 2 deviations for, I think, 2 very solid running back darts that allowed us to catch up at quarterback and then just punt tight end. So I wouldn't really change anything. Again, the only contention point is maybe, I did forget a little bit of the weirdness of Dubs, who people brought up from last year, which is fair, but that's been so quiet that, much like the Tyreek Hill thing, where if it's not talked about from the team for months, I'm assuming it's closed book. If he was going to get moved, it would have made more sense to move him before camp. I guess he could still get moved, but then he potentially becomes a better option, if he goes somewhere else on a better team. I think anybody trading for a big boundary receiver is likely a contender. I don't think it's a bad team trying to just fill holes because they need a tank. So I'm very fine with how he played this.
Yeah. So in terms of the rest of the week, we've got plenty more content coming on the channel. I know Rich has got more Dynasty stuff coming your way, and I will be live on Thursday afternoon time for most Americans at 4 p.m. Eastern. I'll be on Drafters and talking through my first run of best ball rankings for the year. Tyler, are you back with the Trifle Tower?
Yeah, the Typhel Tower will be back Thursday evening. I don't remember whose channel. I think it's Best Ball Guys channel this week. Sub to that channel, Typhel Tower, as we get rocked up to start posting extremely chaotic highlights and clips from our fun shows. And then I believe I finally succeeded in not loading up on extra streams late in the week just yet. So I will just shout out that if you missed Mathology, who was the #1 BBM finisher in the regular season last year, friend of ours, he, I, and Bindles all synced up for another Best Ball Mania draft and a puppy last Friday night, where the fish bonk back for the 3rd year in a row. And we talked through some fun macro stuff and roster construction building. So a lot of good alpha getting talked there for Underdog's flagship contest. So if you missed that, go check it out. We're gonna keep cranking along. Like Rich said, like Tom said, we got rankings coming out. Wednesday's the big schedule drop. So come join the Discord. Come join all the fun drafts. A lot of fun stuff cooking up, and I'm excited because the drafts are back to feeling so good.
Yeah, and hey, look, Trifle, look, it works. There's 3 of you. Like, come on. The Trifle Tower. It just works.
I hate the name. I did not come up with a name, so it's definitely not my favorite.
Brilliant. Well, for everyone who joins in the chat tonight, truly appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. A lot more best ball to come between now and when the drafts close. We will catch you again very soon. Catch you later.